Okay. We're going to start with administrative costs, the Board of Education. We do have an increase on line 490, policy services. And this is primarily because I moved the cost of board docs up into this code. Previously, that was in data, central data processing. The second other large increase is in the district clerk line. That was because the board had given the district clerk an increase this year, and that was more than what was originally budgeted, and that is the primary reason for the 10% increase. The district meeting is the same, no change. Central administration, we have a 5.66 increase. Part of that is I did plan for a little leeway for the board for the next superintendent. And we did give some money in equipment because we were going to move into the Sag Harbor Learning Center, and the superintendent might need to get some new furniture, something that cabinets, that type of thing.
Lori, just a quick question. What did you budget in for the new superintendent in this budget?
For what, particularly?
You gave a little leeway. What does that mean?
Well, I didn't know what to budget, for a salary. All right, so if you look, I budgeted $246,000, all right, for salary. Okay. Go on to the next line.
Is that more or less that's less than the previous superintendent was making?
No, that's more than the previous superintendent is making, but it is kind of midline in what superintendents are getting throughout the Long Island area. Okay, finance. All right. We have an increase in the 150 line, and that is primarily because we moved my old position into the 150 line. So Rashida is now budgeted in 150, where previously that position was budgeted in 160. And you can see that this, the decrease there. There's a decrease in contractual. That is because I moved the borrowing expenses into the treasurer's contractual. And you can see, if you go to her line, that there is contractual large increase there. Right, and that will take care of any Moody's, capital markets, and other things that are related to borrowing costs. Purchasing, I'm looking, we have 5,000 contractual that takes care of any of our bidding costs, things that we might want to go into with a contractual thing with another district. BOCES purchasing is where we go on with our cooperative bidding, and that's basically stayed flat. General support and legal fees, I just gave a small increase, and we're going on to personnel contractual. The 13,000 that you see there is basically a change because we have like ASOP, which is definitely personnel related, where we're monitoring people's absences. Before that was budgeted into data processing, so I'm moving that up into personnel. Personnel versus services, we get several minor expenses that we pay through, all right? We have some, if an employee needs support in a particular area, they're having problems, and we're going and, we're covering it there. Personnel. that's, you know, the large increase, but dollar-wise, it's really not. When we go into public information, I did take something out to more in line with what we're spending, and we do have a decrease of 6% there. Did I skip one? Okay, employee benefits. The primary change in employee benefit is going to be in your pension costs. The New York State ERS and the TRS. We do have an increase in Social Security. That is basically primarily just on raises that are going to go through for next year. I decreased unemployment insurance because we really haven't been spending that much. And I was able to basically leave health insurance flat because we have had basically a zero increase for the first half of next year. The total increase on employee benefits is about 5%.
Lori, could you just explain a little more the jump in the teacher's retirement, just for anyone watching, why that number is jumping so much?
Okay, well, we go to the next slide, which shows you the employer contribution rate. So not only are we going to have increases in salary due to lane changes or staff, then we're going to have a percent increase from 8.86% to 9.53%. So that is a big driver. Teacher salaries are a large portion of our budget, and we're going to have a large increase in TRS. I went and also showed the increases on ERS. We primarily have tiers 3 and 4 right now. So before it was at 15.7, now it's going to 16. Tier 5, every tier is going up. So 13.1 to 13.3, tier 6, 9.2 to 9.5. And that was, I didn't realize I changed it so fast. That's primarily the reason. We did have a fairly large cost this year, all right, for ERS. And I had to move money in as part of a budget transfer for the portion of our ERS from April to June of this year. I'm going into debt services and transfers on the band. We're going to be going out to bond to pay off the bands. Because we've had the bands for several years, we're required by law to pay off part of the principal. So that represents the $55,000. The band interest is decreasing, but we are going to have about a month's worth of the band interest in the following year that we need to pay. The TAN interest, we're currently leaving flat. We're a little concerned about next year, how tax monies are going to be coming in. So I think the best way is to plan for perhaps needing a little bit more money. The final thing is I put the transfer to debt service fund up into debt. Because that entire transfer is for our current long-term debt that we are required to pay for the current year. The other transfers are below: the transfer to the lunch fund, the special aid fund, and the capital fund. The lunch for we had discussed prior. We're paying employee benefits now. For 2 of the employees, we're paying roughly 70% of the cost. For the other two employees, we're paying 50% of the cost, but employee benefits, health insurance is a major cost. The special aid fund is our estimate at this time for what it's going to cost for our share of the extended year program. And the last is our capital fund. We've been doing an interfund transfer of $50,000 for the last few years. This will allow you to go and do a small project. Currently, with this, we would have like $150,000 that you could use for a project. I'd like to. Okay, I did do a reconciliation from draft 3 to draft 4. You did ask us to look for cuts. We went back to the department heads, and this is what we came up with. It's roughly 111,000. It is 111,000. So we've gone from 44,443,423 down to 44,332,423 dollars. I've shown the budget components. I just wanted administrative runs around 12%. That is all the first portion of the budget. It considers the superintendent, the board of ed, the business office, personnel, and various other costs, central processing. The capital program is basically all of the operations of facilities. And the rest of everything else is program, all right? We are service industry, we're teaching, and most of our expenditures go through the instructional. The appropriation budget, shown another way, is how much is our salaries and benefits. It represents 78% of our budget, and the balance of all the other expenditures are 22%. I wanted to go over the budget revenue and other financing sources. On this particular one, we kept everything the same except for recognizing the cut and the amount of how much tax revenue that we will ask the voters to come up with. And with the $111,000 less, our tax rate would go from 3% down to 2.7131%. All right, and you can see that the budget, the total budget, is different at the bottom from previous period. Scenario 2 is we've been notified that the state is going to be making tax cuts or state aid cuts. They will not tell us how much they are making. It's really a guess at this time. I did, which would be the worst case scenario, is a 50% cut in our foundation aid. That is roughly $870,224. All right, and that would mean that we would have to make up the difference in pulling from our reserves. So this first slide shows you with the foundation cut of $50,000 and still keeping the 2.71 tax levy. The scenario 3 shows you with the 50% foundation cut and keeping the 3% tax levy that we had originally proposed. And the reason is that we would have to use up $111,000 less of reserves. All right. At this point, I mean, we don't know whether it'll be 50%. Well, I've heard anything from 5% to higher. Currently, The state is going to be about $10 billion in the hole for the response to the virus, and we don't know what revenues are going to be coming in for next year. So I'd rather be prepared and, put out for the most, and then as we go along during the year, if we don't need it, we don't use it. And meanwhile, we can go and make decisions as far as cutting back on purchases and perhaps hiring as we go along throughout the year. I want to show you how much real estate taxes take for the budget. It's about 94%. The rest of the budget makeup is really minimal. All right. Using the this was when we first did our first scenario, no state aid cut. We were going to use 490,000 from ERS. I showed what our current balances are, what our remaining balances would be at the end of the year. That doesn't count in if we have any money left over from this year, all right, that we might be able to go and put into a reserve. This is scenario 2, foundation aid with a 50% foundation aid cut and a 2.71% tax rate. We would use up a total of $1,361,000 worth of reserves and some of our unassigned fund balance. Scenario 3 is where we stayed with the 3% tax levy. It would reduce us going into our fund balance by $111,000, and reduce our overall use of reserves by $1,250,069. This is our historical assessed values for both the town of Smithtown and the town of East Hampton. As you can see that they grow each year. Part of that growth is done by an increase in the actual homes themselves, but the other part of the growth is due to new homes being built and extensions being put on, which are now being taxed at a higher rate. I gave a scenario. All right, this is the 2020 with a 1.55% tax base growth. That tax base is only new homes and extensions on a home. It does not have anything to do with the value increasing of your home. If we did a 2.7, I can't read this. I'm sorry, one moment. Now this is for scenario 1 and 2, all right, where it comes up with a 2.71, where we do a 2.71 tax levy, and this would be the various costs, all right, that a taxpayer would have. So for a $1,142,000 home in East Hampton, the average taxpayer would actually see a decrease in their taxes of $79.74 or $6.64 a month. For a taxpayer in the town of Southampton, they would have a decrease of $69.78 a month or $69.78 a year, $5.82 a month. The following slide, this slide shows the same exact thing, only with a 3% tax levy. Here, instead of having a decrease in the actual taxes, all right, you are having a small increase. So you would have an increase of 6.69 cents a year for East Hampton, and you would have an increase of $63.37 for Southampton. And that is an annual basis, the monthly cost would be $5.56 and $5.28. And that's with a 3% tax levy. This is what I filed with the State Comptroller's Office. Our allowable tax increase was 3.07%. We're under the tax cap. We told them right now that we are going with a 3% tax levy. This isn't a permanent thing. We can change at any time. But that is what is currently listed with the State Comptroller's Office. And the final budget review will be next month, April 21st. We'll have to see if we are still under pause.
Yeah, they changed the budget vote in the election. You're aware of that. So they changed that to at least June 1st, with an implication or a possibility that it'll be later than that.
And they did
That came out
reference
this
that all the
afternoon.
associated dates with that, like when you need to send something out to the public with the budget, all gets moved back with that final date.
Yes.
So that
Because
gives us
the
more
dates
time
are-
to reflect on this and decide whether we want to have a different percentage increase.
Yes. It does. And I thought, I don't think that, things would necessarily change so much. I think that the situation is more or less what the situation is going to be. Nobody's going to know, I really think, in June anymore what's going to go in the future year than what we currently know.
I've got a few specific questions about the presentation. Is this a good time to jump in with those?
Sure.
Okay, terrific. And I'm going to say the slide number because when I opened it, it had that in the draft.
Okay.
So if it doesn't align with this, I apologize. But slide number 4, I don't think you touched on this. The treasurer's contractual was up $38,350.
Yes, I did. I had said that I had moved expenses related to borrowing, which is
Okay.
mainly Moody's, from business down to treasurer.
All right, so that's not staff. That's other associated costs.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And then in terms of the transfers in slide 14, 15, 16, and then the proposed transfers,
Yes.
I just think a follow-up to tonight would be helpful to go back 4 or 5 years and look at what we've historically transferred, just to give context to kind of what that would put us in terms of the maximum we can have. Would it be like gutting a fund versus taking a small percentage? What do we usually do? Just to give some broader context to it, because I feel like this is a year where there may be unusual things that could get on a slide, and just that context would be really helpful.
Well, I do show, for 17, 18, what was transferred, what was budgeted. Same thing with 2018 and 19. You can see last year we budgeted only 35,000, but we moved 130.
I'm sorry, you what? 130? I didn't hear that.
We, in 2018, 2019, we had to transfer 130,000. The fund was in a large deficit.
Lori, can you go to the slides that you guys are talking about so that we can, because I'm scrolling through on my phone, trying to find the slides you guys are talking about as you talk about them.
I was just going to say that too. Thank you.
It's this one right here, debt service and transfers. Just give us a minute.
The ones I was referring to were slides 14, 15, and 16.
Okay. 14, 15, and 16.
Just because that's where there were proposed transfers of funds.
It's really debt service and transfers, correct?
I was looking at the proposed budget transfers, and some of the columns were going up quite a bit.
Right.
So that was my question about what does that
Okay.
do to the fund? And historically, like if we funded it to a robust amount, are we now gutting some of them, or is it a small percentage? Just to provide context, because more people looking at this won't understand that.
So I must be misunderstanding your question because I'm looking at the debt service and transfer slide. I see the 2017 expenditures, 30,000 for the lunch fund.
Mhm.
We budgeted 30,000. If you go to 2018, 2019, we budgeted 35,000, but we had to move 130,000 in. Now, part of it is because we were using up, they had fund balance for previously that they were eating into. We're out of fund balance. So in 2018, 2019, we had to transfer 130,000 into the fund because we were in a deficit position.
I wasn't talking, I'm sorry about this slide. It was slide, when we do the scenarios, 1, 2, and 3.
Oh, okay.
Again, slides 13, 14, and 15 are the scenarios 1, 2, and 3, where on the bottom we talk about appropriating from our reserves.
Right.
Some of the scenarios, big chunks of money. And I was just suggesting that since we have, we'll have a follow-up to this and we've got more time now, I think it's important to put what that means in context of, to what extent are we at all gutting any of those funds in order to keep our percentage increase higher in this budget,
Right.
or to reduce it and still have the same level of investment.
Well, actually, the primary reason that we have reserves is exactly for this type of scenario. All right, where all of a sudden, all right, state aid is being slashed because of a devastating event. It's not something that's going to happen year and year again. TRS, ERS, we're not expecting, I would expect them in future years, we're going to have a large increase. But that's something because, again, it's the events that are happening currently. All right. The purpose of reserves is to save for these rainy days and to use them. All right. So we have continuity of program. All right. Otherwise, that's really the whole reason to use them. So, I mean, this is what you've been saving for. I mean,
Yeah, this is Ellie. If I could chime in, because there's so many things that are unknown at this point, we don't know when school will open, we don't know what the state aid position is, that this would allow us the flexibility of when we know what the actual factors are, we can either use the reserves or lower the actual expenditures. But this gives us flexibility until we know where the state is and where we are.
I mean, the state at this point they will not give us a percentage. All right. They said that they're going to go and break it up quarterly because they don't understand what the revenue situation is going to be. So I picked the worst scenario, which is 50% of our foundation aid. I would be very surprised if to me, that's a really high number. A lot of other districts are picking a much smaller number. All right, I just think that we're a high wealth district. We'll probably get hit a little bit more with the, if a poorer district got a 5% cut, it would be devastating to them. So I think the legislature and I think that Governor Cuomo will probably going to make the wealthier districts feel more of it. But just because we pass a budget doesn't mandate that we're spending the budget. All right, I think the administration is very aware that this is a very volatile time and will make the appropriate decisions as more and more information comes to light.
But if we have a budget that passes, that helps contribute to the percentage that people are taxed. And my concern is, and I think we'll continue to talk about this, is, I'm committed, I think every board member is committed to try to maintain and improve all the educational programs. We are in an environment that's unprecedented, that's hard to predict, but I would expect that we're going to have a significant part of our tax base be hurting financially in the next 12 months. People who haven't earned money right now or are going to earn very little to no money in the next 12 months. And so I just hope that we're looking through a lens of not only wanting to do our best to maintain the programs, but also respecting that financially we're going to be in a community that's going to be crippled to some extent.
Well, that's also why I wanted to show you for a homeowner, all right, who has a home that's valued for more than $1 million, what the actual cost would be to them as far as an increase was concerned. All right, so that you can see it's not hundreds and hundreds of dollars, that it's really a pretty small, minor amount.
So can you hear me, Board of Education, or am I muted?
No, we hear you.
Yeah, I think what Ellie said before is very pertinent, and that is that we're dealing with a lot of unknowns at this point. The governor, he's got his hands full, obviously, but what he said the other day with regard to foundation aid was there's not a lot of conclusions we can draw from that. And I think Chris's point is accurate, that we also don't know what the impact's going to be 3, 6, 9, 12 months out. We are seeing our community start to hurt financially. And I think, what the numbers will be 3 weeks from now or 5 weeks from now, we don't know. But we tried to strike a balance with this iteration of the budget that balanced maintaining program with being, fiscally prudent. And what Lori was saying is that there is a reduction when you apply the growth factor to people's taxes. Whether or not that's sufficient to address the hurt that people are going to feel, that question remains open.
Lori, my question would be, why wouldn't you use more of the unassigned fund balance than, basically emptying out some of the reserves?
Well, the unassigned fund balance goes from year to year, and you have complete freedom on
Correct.
whatever amount you want to take out of it. The other fund reserves, all right, they're kind of fixed. You can only use it up to the amount that you're budgeting. So the amounts that I used for the reserves was actually the amounts that we were budgeting in this current year's budget. I really don't expect to go and use all of those reserves. If it was the worst case scenario, I think that we'd make a decision to drastically try to cut spending with anything that was a little bit where we had a choice. For example, we do have the special projects that Paul had wanted to do. He did cut at 60,000, but there's another 65,000 there. The things were really bad and didn't turn around, we wouldn't spend it. I had spoken to him earlier today, and I said, if we do something like this and we have the money, we'd do it at the end of the year. We're not going to be doing it in the beginning of the year. So my thing is to be very, very careful in the beginning of the year with how we're spending. We'll look at every purchase order and try to go and limit any kind of spending that we can to the absolute necessities until we go on.
And how are we looking this year for surpluses at the end of the year currently?
So originally I had planned that we would have the 750,000. I still think that we're going to have that amount, but everything's so up in the air, it's a little difficult to tell. We're still paying everybody. We've cut back, obviously, I have very few POs coming through. I'm looking at other things. We are spending a lot more on food right now because a lot of the free and reduced kids are taking, advantage of the program. Other things we don't know. You know, I'm totally up in the air. I don't know what expenses we might have to pick up.
Lori, what's your recommendation? I think you know this budget better than anybody, as far as board action moving forward. What are your thoughts on what you think we should be doing?
Well, the thing is, I really think that administration, all right, is probably in the best position as we go on in the budget. What this allows us to do is, if we are okay, to go forward with the budget as planned. But if things happen and things don't look so rosy, all right, we will go and take appropriate steps. So I think that all of us are here are committed to doing what's best for the students and what's best for the community. And we don't want to put anybody in a position where we are going into a deficit. I just think this is probably the best scenario, and realize that most people would have a minimal tax increase. We're talking less than, I'm looking on this one slide, $70. Well, this one, $70 less a month. So the next one, we're talking an annual increase of $66 a year.
But Lori, I think it's worth pointing out that when you apply the growth factor, there's not an increase at all.
Well, on this one, it's a 1.31% increase on the second slide.
On the second one.
Yeah, that's with a 3% tax
But
levy.
on the other two,
It's not. It's a
Right.
decrease. The taxpayer would actually have a decrease.
the other thing that I would, I talked to Lori about it earlier today, is that we also have to take a multi-year view of this. So with any kind of accessing funds in terms of the reserve funds to lower the tax levy, we have to address that commitment in year 2, 3, and 4 in terms of how it affects the budget as well. So, any decisions that we make this year reverberate for years 2, 3, and 4 as well, and we should be mindful of that.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thanks, Lori and Jeff and everybody that had a hand, and Ellie and everyone that had a hand in putting this together. And I'm glad that we've got some more time to think about it, given how up in the air everything is right now.
And one more thought to add is that to remember that anything that you pass now is just authorization. You don't actually set the tax levy until the fall. So you still have flexibility.
So that's everything. Then I think we can go to the business meeting if everybody would log into board.
Staying on the same Skype meeting, just board docs as well, correct?
Correct.
Jordana, based on the new date, which we know is tentative, of June 1st, can we just be supplied after the meeting at some, in the next couple of weeks, what the date is in which we would have to have this firmed up, if it would be June 1st, just so we know what that horizon might look like?
Yes.
Yeah, I had a similar question earlier because it's also affecting the election and everything. So I don't think we have any guidance yet as to kind of when all of the new cut dates are. We just were told that everything's being pushed back. So
it looked like the guidance said that you push it back like in proportion to what the date is. So I was just curious if they look at the calendar and say, okay, like the notice would have to go in the mail by X date, like just so that we would know, like in general, if it's June 1st, this would be like the 2-week window, whatever, just so that we don't end up showing up at a meeting and like, oh, tonight's the night and we didn't know. That's all.
So typically what happens is that our attorney provides guidance in a memorandum the following day. So I anticipate we'll get something tomorrow that addresses those very questions.
awesome. Cool. All right. So Victoria, are you on mute? Can you hear?
Yes.
Great. Is everybody logged into board docs?
Yes.
All right, can I get a motion to call the meeting to order?
So moved.
Second.
All right, so can you just tell me who that is? Motion?
I think that was Chris as first and Brian as second.
Yep, that's good.
Okay, it should be open for you. Waiting for Alex.
What do you need me to do?
Are you
I'm
logged
gonna-
in Docs to open the meeting?
So, yeah, I vote yes.
Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you.
All right, and for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands.
For all.
Okay, so for public input, I received 2 emails that were requested to be read aloud. The first one is from Catherine Dowling. She wrote, "To whom it may concern, I have a pre-K and second grade student in the district. First of all, I would like to commend the pre-K teachers for their daily videos teaching reading and other projects to the students. It has made such a difference for my daughter to be able to see her teachers' faces and continue learning through this new medium. However, there has been a complete lack of communication from my second grader's teacher. I have spoken with other parents in other classes and the feeling is mutual. 30 minutes of a few math problems and some reading is not nearly enough to supplement an education. No new content has been introduced, nor has anyone checked on their progress or work. I understand these are uncharted waters, but other schools have managed to navigate appropriately using Zoom calls and virtual classrooms. At this point, we have been out of school 2 weeks, and for now, much is longer in unknown. For how much longer is unknown. It is a disservice to the students in this district to continue on this path. The students need to see and hear from their teachers as well as their classmates. I've heard that the reason there has not been virtual lessons is due to the fact that some students might not have access to the internet. I don't believe there is anyone in the district without access to the internet. However, if there is, I'm surprised there isn't money in the budget to provide these students with a tablet. Further, I'm sure people would gladly chip in to help fund these students for the good of all the other students. I look forward to your response and would like to submit this email to the next BOE meeting tomorrow night for consideration on future plans. Sincerely, Catherine Dowling." And I had responded to her over email earlier or last night. The second is from Elena Loretto. She writes, Board of Ed, question, what line item will pay the salary for the assistant interim superintendent for her 30-day position? Thanks, Elena Loretto. So those are the 2 comments from public input. And moving on to the superintendent's report. So Jeff, your turn.
Yeah, so today is the 11th day of remote learning. So the first day was March 16th. We had taken off the Thursday and Friday prior to that Monday. And our original plan was to deliver remote learning activities for several weeks. What we've realized over the last week is that, and we knew this from the start, that if we were out of school for an extended period of time, beyond April break, that we would have to adapt and look to utilize different mediums and increase the connection between faculty and our students. So over the last week or so, actually the last 2 weeks, we've been working with faculty both at the middle school, high school, and the elementary school, exploring ways and coming up with plans to expand our remote learning opportunities, with the goal being that there'll be a rollout at the end of April break. So what is that format, or what does that look like? Mr. Malone, Ms. Carriero, and myself have had department meetings, grade level meetings whole faculty meetings where we discussed different platforms to deliver the remote learning content and what works best. Our discussions have centered around a couple of key issues, which is student access and issues around equity. And I think we're making progress. At the middle school, high school, we have a faculty advisory committee that began working on this about a week ago, and they're scheduled to come forth with their recommendations the latter half of this week as well. So there's been a lot with regard to the remote learning. I do want to say that the primary focus of what we're doing, the planning in terms of moving forward, it was to increase the connection between teachers and students, as well as transitioning from primarily review in the first week and a half to 2 weeks to the delivery of new content, and trying to make that transition as smooth as possible. I do want to thank Mr. Malone. For those of you who are in the elementary school, you're well aware of his remote learning, his remote morning program rather. The first week, he had 2 sessions, Monday and Wednesday, and he's expanded that last week and this week to Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And he's been working with his staff to implement a everyday morning program following April break. So I want to thank him and his staff for all their efforts. A couple other updates. For those of you who don't know, we have 167 students in our district out of a student population of roughly 1,000 that are classified free and reduced lunch, meaning they're eligible to access the program. So since Monday, March 16th, we've been making meals and delivering them Mondays and Wednesdays to cover breakfast and lunch 5 days per week. Today is our 11th day of doing that. So I want to thank the food service staff for all the work and the bus drivers for helping with the delivery. The way it's working is those meals are put on school buses and transported where families pick up the meals at designated bus stops. And we've also established 2 walking only stops where people can walk to a location and pick it up. So again, thank you to the food service staff for all of their help. Finally, the Chromebooks. It was referenced earlier that perhaps not everybody in the district would have access to the internet or access to the technology necessary to access the remote learning opportunities. So there's been a lot of outreach at both buildings, and to date, over 50 Chromebooks have been handed out to students who do not have access to a computer. And the technology department is working on expanding internet access for families. We've publicized how families can access free internet and the contact information for them to contact the company that offers it. So again, this is sort of a work in progress, but big picture, I think the staff of the district has worked very hard to address an ever-changing situation. Every day we come in, there's something new. And from the administrators to the bus drivers to the teachers to the food service workers, everybody's been great. So that's the update.
On the Chromebook, I have one question. I know that obviously first the Chromebooks were going to people who were in need. I know I've heard of a few families where they have, let's say, multiple kids, but not as many Chromebooks or computers as kids and adults that need them. At this point, can families that are in that situation reach out to try to get a Chromebook?
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. We've had a few families reach out already who are dealing with that scenario, and we've provided Chromebooks to them.
Okay, and they should just reach out to their building principal?
Correct.
Jeff, this is Yorgos. Just had a quick question. Have there been any issue? I mean, we see the neighboring school districts. You know, they have already like more of a plan in place with distant learning, and it seems that we're taking a much slower approach. So I just wanted to understand, you know, what are the issues around that?
I think I can't comment on where the other districts are. I mean, I know I do have my own 2 children in another district, and I've witnessed what they're going through. I can say with regard to our approach to this, we were very purposeful from the start that for the 2-week period, roughly, we would be delivering remote learning access opportunities, and that the expansion of that would be very well thought out. And I think that is what we've been doing for the last 2 weeks. And I know there are some people who have expectations that don't jive with what we're doing right now. But I remain committed, I think Mr. Malone and Ms. Carriero as well, to rolling it out in a very organized manner so, you know, that it works well for all students. And I think we're proceeding at a pace that is reasonable. Again, knowing that not everybody agrees with us.
Okay.
Jeff, this is, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to ask one more question. So the principals right now ensure, like, how are like the teachers supervised, that they provide kind of like every teacher in every grade is providing kind of the same curriculum across, you know, let's say 3rd grade or 4th grade or 5th grade. How is that done?
Mr. Malone, are you online right now? I think Mr. Malone was online. I'm not sure he is.
All right, so that's just a question. Whenever Matt joins again, just answer.
I just got a text message from Scott. It looks like there's probably about 6 or 7 people logged in as me that are not me.
I saw that.
Although Scott can go in and change the names, he doesn't know who's who without a video. So if you think you are logged in as me, wouldn't mind at least turning on your video for a short while so that he can then, or if you can change it on your own, great. You probably have to go to the participant panel and just change it. But otherwise, just turn on your video and Scott will try to do it for you. And the reason why it's important, just so you know, is that the new laws regarding teleconferencing for school board meetings require that all of these meetings be transcribed. And so whoever is doing the transcribing is going to have a lot of commentary from Jordana Sobi.
I just did that. I went into participants and saw that I was one of the many Jordanas, and it's very easy to actually put your own name in there because you don't want to sound like me, I'm sure. But can I ask a couple of questions?
Sure.
For Jeff before we move on? Thank you for that explanation. And I know that there's no toolkit or a magic pill that makes this all work perfectly across every student in every household. Sure. And I think as board members I've never gotten so many calls. I think people are all home, and so they're all, it's very insular right now, people's worlds, and everybody's stressed. So there's a heightened level of anxiety around this. And I think it's important to remind people that the employees who are giving instruction, many of them have children in their own household who may need assistance in their own day as well. And so we have to respect that they've got to balance that. I did reach out to board members in East Hampton and Bridgehampton, friends of mine on the board, just to see like how they're doing with this, the process, how is it going? And I do think that different districts are finding creative ways. So if there's, and I know everybody's stretched for time, but if there's a way in which there could be communication so that best practices or what's working and not working in these unprecedented times can be shared across districts, I think that could be helpful in not reinventing the wheel. The other thing I would suggest is maybe down the pike. I know we're 2 weeks in and we're going to try some new things, but at least for certain age students, maybe doing some surveys might be helpful, because it's impossible for, I would imagine, an administrator to really know the level of engagement every teacher's having. You can't go in the classroom and observe anything, right? So it's much harder. and you can't look into Parent Portal because right now Parent Portal is not being updated at all. So you have no idea. So if there's a way to survey them and also perhaps to have more consistent communication, the building principals with parents as well, you know, to say, you know, this is what this week will probably look like if your child feels disconnected or you feel like you need to give feedback or whatever. But I think the more that we can create easy ways to access feedback loops, the better the outcomes will be, because this is not probably going to be another 2 weeks. I was on a conference call that NISBA set up on Saturday with the, you know, with a bunch of folks who are the head of education in the state. And it seems like, I mean, I think the president announced that we have to social distance to the end of April. So, so I think we have to think about this as it's, you know, kind of not that we're not killing time, but that this could be needed to be a longer term opportunity.
Yeah, thank you for those comments. I think, and maybe I wasn't clear, but I think from the very start, you know, we've been thinking very thoroughly about the different options available to us as a district to deliver the remote learning. And so I'll just summarize for the middle school, high school at this point, where we're at. I have had discussions with Mr. Malone, and he's focused primarily on at this point on establishing more of a schedule for families to alleviate some of the uncertainty, a daily schedule, if you will. At the middle school, high school, the three options that faculty and administrators have discussed primarily are on a spectrum. On the one end, you have something like Blackboard, which is basically following the school schedule, where a student would start their day at 7:50 and they would end at 2:51, and they would follow their normal schedule that they would in school. There are a couple of significant drawbacks to that idea. I think the two ones that come to mind are, what about the student who has responsibilities at home that prohibit him or her from sticking to that schedule? And then, Chris, you've already mentioned the other factor, which is the ability of faculty, teachers that is, to adhere to that schedule depending on if they have their own childcare issues. So that's the first option. The second option would be to go with a Google Hangouts solution, where basically we set aside hours of the day where departments could have Google Hangouts. So for instance, you might have English from 8 to 9:30 in the morning. From 9:30 to 11, you'd have math. From 11:30 to 12:30, you'd have science, and so forth. You do run into several of the same problems in terms of access on the part of students to be able to stick to that schedule, as well as teachers being able to deliver live instruction at specific times of the day. The last option, which tentatively is the one that the faculty committee has spent a majority of time on, is the notion of videotaping lessons, making them accessible to students, and then establishing flexible office hours so that students can ask questions about what they view on the videos. I also want to note that different disciplines and different classes lend themselves to video instruction in a different way. So, for instance, mathematics might look entirely different than English. And the ability to carry each of those instructional video periods out, there's going to be varying degrees of difficulty. But that's what the faculty committee is focusing on right now, is the best way to organize it. So tentatively, that's sort of a summary of where grades 6 through 12 are at. Mr. Malone, are you with us yet? Perhaps he's still Miss Jordan, Miss Sobey. I'm not sure. But in any case, that's where we're at.
It might be that you might be muted. I don't know, Scott, if you could go and unmute the other me, and maybe that's Matt and he's trying to speak. I'm not sure.
And how has faculty cooperation been on this new learning experience?
They've been absolutely wonderful. You know, I've had 2 whole faculty meetings at the middle school, high school with Miss Carriero. And if we have, faculty and staff numbering 78 or something like that, 76 are participating in the meeting. And Ms. Carriero's had numerous department meetings and grade level meetings, and everybody's been participating with enthusiasm, trying to point out to their colleagues what's working well, what could perhaps work better, sharing ideas, those kinds of things. I just want to make sure that as a district, and I think Ms. Carriero and Mr. Malone feel the same way, that when we commit to something, we commit to doing it thoroughly and well. And that's why I'd like to get the planning taken care of so that when we roll it out after April break, it's as seamless as it can be.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Jeff, this is Alex. I just wanted to while we're on this subject, and I appreciate everyone's questions and concerns about the distance learning, and obviously it's a work in process, and everyone's doing what they can under the circumstances. But I think it bears repeating that our administration, you folks made a decision to close the school before everyone else, and as a result, there were sacrifices that are made, and there are things that we're working through. But knowing what we know now, you guys unquestionably saved lives in the community by doing that, and we can't commend you enough for that. So I just want to say that again and keep that in mind as we talk about this subject.
I agree with Alex. I have a few friends that teach up island, and they just were checking in with me, and they wanted to thank the administrators for closing the school early. So I had about 3 of them contact me to check in with me. So I just want to, kudos what Alex is saying. They commended us for closing early.
I think it's hard to be the first and it's hard to be the last. And I think it was a brave move to be the first. And I think our decision definitely impacted the decisions of other districts on Long Island, and that ripple effect, I think you can feel proud had a positive impact on the health and wellness of everybody on Long Island.
Mr. Nichols, can you hear me now?
I can.
Oh, okay. I apologize. I thought I was able to access via the phone. So I know you asked me a question. I missed the follow-up, but
so what I had talked about was our efforts as a district, but also at the building level, in terms of what we're focusing on in expanding our remote learning opportunities. And I talked a lot about what the middle school, high school was wrestling with.
Sure.
And briefly referenced what the elementary school was doing. But if you could spend a minute or two and talk about what you're working on and what you envision, that would be great.
Okay. Yeah. And I apologize, everyone, but just briefly, I think overall, we've had great conversations amongst the faculty, and I really applaud the group for their willingness to work through this, this challenge for all. Initially, we had a focus on really presenting material that was more of a review in the beginning, and now knowing that this is going on longer, we're making a shift, but a very measured shift toward how can we, at an age-appropriate level and child-centered way, move into presenting new material. And I know there was reference a few moments ago to what other schools are doing. And, I know there are a lot of great ideas out there, and I, of course, wish those schools the best with how they're approaching this. But at the elementary school, and I know at Pearson as well, we're trying to also stay true to how we do things in our school. And, I think our teachers have put together some great learning opportunities. They definitely are reviewing those and trying to expand those, but we don't want to just provide copious amounts of work for children. We want to provide things that are thoughtful and, like I said, child-centered, and also doable within the circumstances that a lot of families are living under right now. And one other point, at the elementary school, this is something that I have been very careful with, and it's regards to the Google Hangout use or the Zoom meeting use, which I think it's a great tool, and I definitely think it has good potential for us as we most likely will have to move forward for a longer period of time. But when we work with young children, many of whom do not have a lot of experience using technology like older students do, I'm I'm guarding how we roll that out, and I want to make sure we do it in a safe way, in a way that the kids can handle appropriately, and in a way that's going to be beneficial to all. So that's kind of the summary.
Thanks, Matt.
Yep.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Matt.
Matt.
I actually, just my 2 cents on that is I really appreciate you using the technology judiciously. Especially with the elementary school kids, because one, it's like once they go there, they're never going back. So there's that aspect of it. Of course, we need to change some rules now, but
Sure.
I also feel like that I can't say for certain, but I know that, you know, some of the complaints that you might be getting asking for Zoom, I would imagine that there's a false sense from parents that that's going to be some sort of silver bullet. And I just don't know that that's true. I mean, I've seen Zoom used with some of my kids' extracurricular activities, and given the ages they are, they get bored, they walk away.
Yeah.
There's nothing keeping them in front of that video. So I don't know that it's this solution that everyone necessarily thinks it'll be perfect for in every situation.
Right. Correct.
This is Chris. By the way, I agree with you, Jordana. I think that it needs to be age appropriate, and certainly what an 8-year-old is going to be engaged in or be able to be engaged in is very different than a 16 or 17-year-old. And so the circumstances can be different. I was just curious, did anybody from the district call into the conference on Saturday? There was a COVID-19 and its effects on school operations, what we know and don't know yet, conference call Saturday.
I did not.
All right. I have 3 pages of notes, then I'll just email everybody. I don't want to go through it now because some of it has legal implications, and I feel like that should come from the attorney through the administrators. But there were about more than 1,200 people on the call, and it did have the interim commissioner of education and deputy secretary for education answering like a lot of key questions about what they know and don't know. And I think that our administrators have been rightly saying that there's still a lot in flux. One of the interesting things I thought that they addressed up front was someone said, why are you doing this in 2-week increments? You know, when other school districts, other states have addressed it differently. And they talked about all the statutory issues. There are so many laws in New York State about when and what you need to do in education that they're kind of chipping away at 2-week increments so they can also get the statutory issues addressed so that schools can progress in a legal way. Because with the change, there are deadlines that can no longer be met but have legal issues. And they said that if it keeps, you know, they're going to get to a certain point where then they're not confined by that 2-week increment, but that's why they've been moving slowly. It was one key reason why.
Yeah, just to add on to what you said, Chris, I didn't listen in on that particular conference. We have on many others, but we do get regular summaries from various organizations like the Suffolk County School Superintendents Association, School Administrators Association of New York, School Boards Association. Basically, they summarize those conference calls and provide the pertinent information to us, and you just summarized it pretty accurately in terms of some of the key considerations.
All right, is there any other questions or comments on coronavirus impact? We'll move on to the consent agenda. If everybody is still logged in to that. I'm going to motion to approve item 6.1 through 6.9.
Can I make a motion to go into executive? I had given a heads up to board leadership and administration that I was requesting an exec because I had some questions about these items, and the suggestion was to call the exec during this meeting.
What is the reason for
Questions about appointment of an individual and contract.
So don't we all, this is Alex, don't we already have an exec that we have to do at the end of the meeting? Is it the reason why we can't do this then?
Because it's about an issue we're about to vote on with the consent agenda. That's why. That's why I had asked for it before we were going to go through this, because it relates to an item on this agenda. So I made a motion. Does anyone second it?
Oh, I'll second it.
We'll just have to vote on it if by poll. So I have Chris motioned, seconded, and I'll take the vote. Let's go through Jordana.
Yeah, I'm willing to have an executive session. I just wish that we could have had information regarding the specific questions ahead of time, which I did request, and was told that the issues were not ripe for email, which I either disagree with, but I also don't have any calls, and I don't believe Alex or Jeff do either. So, but I'm certainly willing to hear.
Alex?
I vote no.
Diana?
I guess my question is a procedural question, because it's in the consent agenda, correct? And nothing was requested to be pulled out of the consent agenda?
2 items were pulled out of consent. They are now in action items.
So Chris, is this on things that are in the consent agenda?
It is, and I did not know until it was really too late to pull stuff out that we were not, what I tried to do was to have an exec before we engage the public so that we wouldn't have to leave the public and come back, because they can't watch us leave the room and come back, right? Like a physical meeting. When I found out today that we were not going to proceed with that. So yes, it has to do with an item on the consent agenda.
I'm a yes.
Chris? How do you vote, yes or no, Chris?
Do I vote yes or no about going into, I made the motion.
I know, but I said
Yes,
you
I
just
vote
took a
yes.
vote.
I'm sorry, I vote yes.
Okay, Brian?
Yes.
Susan?
Yes.
Yorgos?
Yes.
Thank you. That's 6-1. Motion passed to go into executive session.
So then every board member, and Chris, I don't know, given that you're calling this, if you want any particular administrators to join, so you'll have to advise.
I would say that the assistant superintendent, the interim superintendent is, I think, fine, because it has to do with an appointment that they're related to.
Okay, so Jeff and Ellie, you're asking to join?
Sure.
Okay, and so then the way this works, guys, is all board members need to leave the meeting and then click on the link for the exec session calendar invite that I sent you and join that meeting. And then to rejoin the board meeting, the public meeting, we'll have to rejoin this meeting. All right? All right, bye. A motion to reconvene out of executive session back into public.
So moved.
All in favor?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the motion and the second before you start.
The motion was to reconvene out of exec. Brian made the first. I'm seconding it. And
Not gonna hear anything.
Who seconded?
I'm gonna try.
Jordan.
Other computer.
Okay, open for your vote.
Is it going to be on board docs?
Yes, please.
There it is. Thank you.
There we go.
Do you have a motion for the consent agenda, Victoria?
Not yet. I'm waiting for Chris and Yorgos to vote for coming out of exec, and then
Yes. I don't know why I haven't got it.
Chris? Chris, did you vote?
Chris, you're on mute.
I did vote. Thanks.
Did you vote yes or no? It's not coming through. Chris, did you vote yet? Oh, gotcha. Okay, great. Thank you. So we can go into consent.
All right, and thanks all for bearing with us throughout these technical difficulties. This is a new endeavor for all of us, and thanks so much, Scott, for fixing the problem so quickly. That was pretty fast. Can I get a motion to approve consent agenda items 6.1 through 6.9?
So moved.
Second.
I'm sorry. Can we just say that there's 7 now? Number 7, because I added the executive session. So number 7 consent agenda would be 7.1 down.
Okay, you know what? I'm going to refresh my screen, then maybe it doesn't pop on.
So it would be 7.1 to 7.9.
Yes. Yep, 7.1 to 7.9. I refreshed.
A motion and a second.
Second.
I didn't hear who motioned. I heard Diana second.
I think it was Brian.
Yes, I do too.
And then Diana. Okay, it's coming up.
I think as a point of clarity, some of these items have been in the works for months, so that the public knows these are not new things coming up. That we've been waiting on items from either civil service or other things, and we've been working on these since the end of last year. So that's important to consider in our determinations here.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Okay,
and I just want to congratulate Paul on the new appointment. I know he had taken that civil service test quite a long time ago, and so I think it's he's been doing a great job for us, particularly with Sag Harbor Learning Center, and it's much appreciated. I think ultimately he's actually probably saved the district quite a bit of money over the last few months.
Thank you very much, Paul.
Can I get a motion to approve action item 8.1?
So moved by Diana.
Second.
Thank you, Diana. Who was second?
That was Susan Schaefer.
Thank you.
Any discussion?
Nope.
Can I just get confirmation that I had asked this, but I don't think I had gotten an answer yet. Did our attorney review this agreement?
I did not forward this agreement to Tom Bowles.
Okay.
Open for vote. I don't have any votes coming through.
I don't have that window yet.
Yeah, it's not popping up. Internet is slow right now. Everybody's on.
Let me try again. Hold on a second. Opened it again. If not, I'll go down.
I don't see anything coming up on my end.
Okay, Diana, how do you vote?
Yes.
Jordana?
Yes.
Brian?
Aye. Yes.
Alex? Alex? I haven't heard from Alex.
I'm not sure he's on this.
He is on it. I think he's on mute. I'll text him. He probably doesn't realize he's on mute.
I can take him off. Susan,
Yes.
Chris,
Would abstain.
and Yorgos.
Yes.
So I just need Alex's vote.
He was on, now I don't see him on. I think it carries regardless, right? So you can just mark him as not present for that vote.
Okay, so then I have 5 yes, 1 abstained, which is Chris, and 1 not present, which is Alex. Motion carried.
Can I get a motion to approve action item 8.2?
So moved.
Second.
Any
I have
discussion?
Diana and Brian, go ahead.
This is Chris. I do have a question. This expires in 2 days. Do we want to amend this, the date of it ending? Because we're not meeting again before then, and we already know that the school's going to be closed through the 15th, and I don't know. Do we need to?
We can amend it.
Because if we don't amend it, then then we wouldn't have an agreement to do this after Wednesday, right?
Right. Right.
So what would you recommend, Jeff, to amend the finish date?
I would, I'm thinking right now, I would say through May 1. When's the next meeting we have?
We have 1 or 2 in April. It could even read to May, or it could read not with a specific date, but as long as whatever you want to term the condition we're in right now.
Mm-hmm.
If that gives
Where
you flexibility.
Where are you seeing the date? Because I'm just not seeing it.
The resolution. It says March 23rd through April 1st. And then when you open the agreement, it actually says it in the agreement as well.
We're looking at 8.2.
Yes.
I don't see that in my 8.2.
If you look at the recommended action.
It says, be it resolved, the Board of Education approves the agreement between Scope and Sag Harbor.
Sorry. For some reason, it was not uploading. It was showing me the resolutions from 8.1. Now I see it. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just figuring if it expires in 2 days, it won't address the need. So, Jeff, whatever you think should be in there, I'm supportive of. If you think it's more flexible language, I'm supporting that, just to be conditional on the circumstances versus the specific date. Whatever you think is easiest to work with.
What about if we do the resolution and the date saying effective as of beginning March 23rd, 2020 up through the end of any school closure related to the coronavirus?
Perfect.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Jeff?
Do you need a motion for that, Victoria? To amend?
Was there a question, Chris?
Yeah, I'm happy to make the motion. My question is if, and this is a big if, so I don't want people to freak out if they hear this on the phone. If this goes into the summer, is this required support provided in summer as well?
I'd have to ask the attorney that. The directive that came back down from the governor directed schools to provide these services. It didn't get into what the obligation was, other than to say that it exists now.
I know that I've been watching Cuomo every day, and his whole thing about not mandating schools be closed is because schools act as a daycare for first responders. And so I would assume, and again, this is an assumption, that when school ceases to be that daycare provider, i.e. school is out for summer recess, then that obligation would be lifted.
But they did also say that we're required to provide it during the break week.
Right. That's why I asked, because it was so you know what? Then maybe because we don't have clarity from the state, we go back to your first suggestion. We could pick a date. It could be May 1st, May 30th, and then we can always renew this when we have greater clarity before the expiration date.
Or we could just say March 23rd through the date that it is required by law, through the end date that is required by law.
Even better.
Good thing you're a contract attorney.
I can be useful for a few things every once in a while.
Effective March 23rd, 2020 through any end date as required by law.
Through the end, yeah, through such end date that is required by law.
Jeff, are you okay with that?
Yep.
Terrific. Thank
Do we
you.
need to
Good.
make a motion and vote on the amendment, or will that just be on the, as amended? You know what I mean? On the
I have
motion.
Diana motion and Brian second, and I'll open it up for voting.
Thank you.
I put Alex in as not present and vote. Oh, I'm sorry. Alex voted. So that's 7. It's unanimous.
Yeah, Alex, are you back on? I think I see your phone number.
Yeah, Victoria's trying to get rid of me.
No. There was,
We all are, but you know, you're here.
Get in line.
you know, Alex, I think it was just for 8.1, we just marked you as not present because for some reason, I think it kicked you off for that moment. And so if you want to change your vote for 8.1, and you're welcome to, otherwise, whatever, it doesn't really, it carried regardless.
No, all good. I'm used to it, Jordana.
Okay. Any items for discussion? I don't have anything. Or unfinished business. I don't have anything. Potential items not scheduled. Speak up. Forever hold your peace. All right. So at this time, I'd like to convene to ask for a motion for executive session for the purpose of discussing the employment of a particular person, the superintendent search, and then as well as to discuss a potential litigation matter.
So we're going back to the other link.
Yes, we'll be going to the other link, and we're for the potential litigation matter. We'll need Ellie, Jeff, and then Jeff and Ellie, feel free if there's other administrators that you think are relevant to the discussion to bring them in as well.
Jordana, will there be a board member excusing themselves from that conversation?
Yes.
I will be.
Yes, just like always.
Yes. So, Brian, I will text you when it's time to join the link again.
Okay, very good.
All right.
I made a motion.
Second.
Anna and Brian.
Jordana, you said we'll be dialing into a separate number?
Yeah, it's that same one that we dialed in, that we linked into for the last exec.
All right, so we log out of this one and then dial that.
Exactly.
Terrific, thank you.
All right, thanks all.
Bye, Victoria. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Guys.
Good night.
Night.
Good night.
What is it? Oh, I don't understand. Are we off the mic now?